I never expected my life to unravel because of a plain white envelope. It was just sitting there on my doorstep, no return address, no markings, nothing but my name written in neat block letters. If I'd known what was inside, maybe I would have left it there. My name is Alara, and until that morning, I thought I had everything figured out. I'm the daughter of Grant and Celeste Winslow, founders of Winslow Wellness, and wife to Nolan Mercer, who runs our Denver branch. We were the perfect power couple, or at least that's what Forbes called us in their 30 Under 30 feature last year. I'd just gotten back from my morning run, still catching my breath in the elevator of our downtown Denver apartment building, when I saw it. The envelope was slightly crooked, like whoever delivered it had been in a hurry. I picked it up, thinking it was probably another wedding invitation or charity gala request. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 sentences that made my stomach drop. Your husband isn't who you think he is. Check the company's financial records from the past 18 months, especially wire transfers to offshore accounts. Sometimes the people closest to us wear the best masks. I read it 3 times, my hands starting to shake. The paper felt heavy, expensive, not the kind you'd buy at Office Depot. Someone who knew what they were doing had sent this. My phone buzzed, making me jump. It was Nolan. Hey, beautiful, don't forget dinner with Mom and Tessa tonight. Mom's making her famous pot roast. I stared at his message, trying to reconcile my charming, successful husband with the implications in the letter. Nolan, who brought me coffee every morning and could make me laugh even during board meetings. Nolan, who my parents had practically adopted as their own son. Can't wait, I typed back, adding a heart emoji like I always did. My finger hovered over the send button before I added, love you. Inside our apartment, everything looked normal. Nolan's coffee mug was still in the sink, his tie from yesterday draped over a kitchen chair. But suddenly, all these familiar things felt like props in a play I didn't know I was part of. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, pulling up our company's financial records. As CFO, I had access to everything, but I rarely checked the Denver branch's details. I trusted Nolan to handle that. Now, looking at the numbers, something felt off. The totals added up, but there were small discrepancies in the reporting patterns. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother-in-law, Lorraine. Alara, dear, please remind Nolan to pick up wine for tonight. And wear that lovely blue dress I got you for Christmas. It photographs so well for the family album. I closed my eyes, remembering how Lorraine had accidentally tagged me in those family photos on Instagram 3 times. Always with captions about her successful power couple. She'd been pushing us to buy a bigger house, too. Something more fitting for the Winslow Mercer legacy. The front door opened, startling me. I quickly closed the financial records as Nolan walked in, looking perfectly put together in his tailored suit. You're home early, I said, hoping my voice sounded normal. Thought I'd surprise you. He smiled, that dimpled smile that still made my heart skip. Maybe we could grab lunch before heading to Mom's? I watched as he loosened his tie, noticing how his hand paused for just a second when he saw the envelope on the counter. It was so quick I almost missed it. Lunch sounds great, I said, standing up. Let me just change quickly. In our bedroom, I slipped the anonymous letter into my jewelry box. Whatever truth it held, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't trust anyone until I figured out what was really going on. Not even the man I'd promised to love forever. As I changed clothes, I could hear Nolan humming in the kitchen, probably making coffee like he always did. Everything seemed so normal, but that letter had cracked my perfect world like a hammer to glass. The question was, how deep did the cracks really go? Lorraine Mercer's house always reminded me of a museum, beautiful to look at but don't touch anything. I sat at her pristine dining room table, watching her arrange flowers while Nolan and Tessa argued about some childhood memory in the kitchen. The pot roast was getting cold, but nobody seemed to care. Alara, darling, Lorraine said, not looking up from her roses, have you given any thought to that waterfront property I mentioned? The realtor says it won't stay on the market long. I gripped my wine glass tighter. We're happy where we are, Lorraine. Happy. Tessa emerged from the kitchen, wine glass already empty. In that shoebox apartment? Please. The Winslow heiress should be living somewhere that matches her status. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. Ask them about the Cayman Islands account. My hand started shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. Nolan appeared behind me, placing his hands on my shoulders. Everything okay, babe? Fine, I said, quickly locking my screen. Just work stuff. Speaking of work, Lorraine chimed in. Nolan tells me the Denver branch is exceeding all expectations. You must be so proud of your husband, Ilara. I forced a smile, remembering the financial discrepancies I'd spotted earlier. Very proud. Tessa snorted, pouring more wine. Must be nice, having everything handed to you. Some of us actually have to work for a living. Tessa, Lorraine warned, but her tone was indulgent, like a parent scolding a favorite child. What? We're family. We can be honest. Tessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. I mean, Ilara's trust fund alone could put Jackson through college twice over. Where is Jackson? I asked, desperate to change the subject. Upstairs, probably hacking the Pentagon. Tessa rolled her eyes. He's going through this weird computer phase. Nolan squeezed my shoulders. Maybe he could intern at Winslow this summer? In the IT department. Actually, I said, surprising myself, that might be a good idea. We could use someone with fresh eyes on our security systems. The room went quiet. Too quiet. I looked up to find Nolan and Lorraine exchanging a look I couldn't quite read. I don't think that's necessary, Lorraine said quickly. Jackson needs to focus on his studies. Right, Tessa. Tessa was staring at her phone, suddenly distracted. Did you see this? The Martinez family just announced their daughter's engagement. God, their ring photo probably cost more than my car. The Martinezes? Lorraine perked up. Nolan, didn't you meet with Robert Martinez last week about that investment opportunity? Just a casual lunch, Nolan said, but his hands tightened on my shoulders. I frowned. I didn't know you were meeting with investors. Oh, it's all very preliminary, Lorraine waved her hand dismissively. But speaking of investments, Ilara, I've been meaning to ask about increasing Nolan's stake in the company. After all, he's family now. My wine glass froze halfway to my lips. That would be a board decision, not mine. But surely your father would listen to you, Tessa pressed. I mean, you're his only heir. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need some air. As I headed for the back patio, I heard footsteps behind me. But instead of Nolan, it was Jackson who appeared at my side. They're always like this, he said quietly, hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets. Pushing and planning. Sometimes I listen to them through the air vents. I looked at him sharply. What do you mean? He glanced over his shoulder, then pulled out his phone. I have some recordings you might want to hear. But not here. Not now. Before I could respond, Nolan called from inside. Ilara? Mom's serving dessert. Jackson quickly stepped away, but not before whispering, check your email tonight. Use a private network. I walked back inside, my mind racing. Across the table, Lorraine was serving perfect slices of cheesecake while Tessa showed Nolan something on her phone, both of them laughing. Everything looked normal, polished, perfect. But now I knew, somewhere in this beautiful house, hidden behind expensive flowers and family photos, there were air vents that held secrets. And a teenager who knew how to find them. I waited until 3 a.m. to check Jackson's email. Nolan was sound asleep beside me, his breathing steady and familiar. The laptop screen cast a blue glow across our bedroom as I connected to a private VPN, just like Jackson had instructed. The audio files were labeled by date. I clicked on the oldest one first, my hands trembling as I put in my earbuds. The company's worth billions now, Lorraine's voice crackled through. And she's the only heir. We need to move faster. I'm doing my best, Mom, Nolan's voice replied. My stomach clenched. But the offshore transfers take time. We can't risk anyone noticing. I closed my eyes, feeling sick. The next recording was worse. Just get her to sign over more control. Tessa this time. She trusts you completely. It's almost pathetic. Nolan's laugh. That's what makes it so easy. My wedding ring felt like it was burning my finger. I slipped it off, placing it on the nightstand. Beside me, Nolan stirred but didn't wake. The final recording was from last week. The Martinez deal could expose everything. Lorraine again. We need to move the money now, before Grant Winslow starts asking questions. I shut the laptop, my mind racing. The Martinez deal, the same one Nolan had dismissed as just lunch. I grabbed my phone, pulled up our banking app, and logged into my personal account. The balance looked normal, but something made me check the transaction history. There it was. Small transfers, nothing suspicious on their own, but they added up to millions over the past year. All going to an account I didn't recognize. Can't sleep? I nearly dropped my phone. Nolan was awake, watching me with those eyes I used to trust completely. Just checking some work stuff, I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. He reached for me, but I stood up. I need water. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter to stop my hands from shaking. My phone buzzed, another anonymous message. Check his laptop. Password, Tessa J, 2006. I glanced back toward the bedroom. Nolan had fallen asleep again. His laptop was in his briefcase by the door. The password worked. Inside, I found a folder labeled Personal. My heart pounding, I clicked through documents, bank statements, transfer records, emails between Nolan and his family discussing their plans, and photos. So many photos of Nolan with other women, in hotels I recognized from his business trips. Find what you're looking for? I spun around. Nolan stood in the doorway, his face unreadable in the darkness. How long? I asked. Does it matter? It matters to me. My voice cracked. It matters to my father, whose company you've been stealing from. He stepped closer. Your father's company? You mean the one you inherited just because you were born a Winslow? Some of us had to work for what we wanted. By stealing? By lying. I backed away, clutching his laptop. Was any of it real? His expression softened. Of course it was real. I love you, Ilera. But love doesn't pay for the life we deserve. The life we deserve? I laughed bitterly. Or the life your mother demands? His face hardened. You don't understand. You've never had to prove yourself worthy of anything. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Jackson. Get out now. Mom and Tessa are on their way over. They know you know. I'm calling my father, I said, reaching for my phone. Nolan moved faster than I expected, grabbing my wrist. You can't do that. Let go of me. Just listen. His voice was urgent now. We can fix this. Together. I'll show you everything, explain everything. Just don't make that call. The front door buzzed. Lorraine's voice came through the intercom. Nolan? Ilera? Open up, dears. We need to talk. I looked at my husband, this man I thought I knew, and saw a stranger. Behind his desperation, I finally saw the truth. I was never anything more than a means to an end. You're right, I said quietly. We do need to talk. All of us. I picked up my phone, starting with my father. The look on Nolan's face told me everything I needed to know about what would happen next. The morning after discovering Nolan's betrayal, I found myself sitting in my father's office, staring at the family photos on his desk. My hands were steady now, but my voice wasn't. Someone's been accessing our offshore accounts, I said, sliding Nolan's laptop across the desk. And it wasn't just company money. They got into my personal accounts too. Dad's face hardened as he scrolled through the files. How long have you known? Since last night. I twisted my now empty ring finger. Nolan's mother and sister are involved too. They've been planning this for years. The door opened and my mother rushed in. Grant, the board members are here. They're asking about the Martinez deal. What Martinez deal? I asked. Dad and Mom exchanged looks. Robert Martinez called this morning, Dad said carefully. Apparently, Nolan offered to sell him controlling interest in our Denver operations, using your voting shares as collateral. The room spun. He can't do that. I never signed anything. Actually, Mom pulled out a document. According to this, you did. 3 months ago. I grabbed the paper, my blood running cold. The signature looked exactly like mine, down to the way I crossed my T's. My phone buzzed. Jackson again. Don't trust the Martinez papers. They're forgeries. I can prove it. Before I could respond, Lorraine's name flashed across my screen. Then Tessa's. Then Nolan's. They're trying to damage control, I said, showing my parents the calls. They know I found everything. Let them panic, Dad said, reaching for his office phone. I'm calling security too. The office door burst open. Nolan strode in, followed by Robert Martinez himself. My heart stopped when I saw what Nolan was carrying, my old laptop. I think we all need to talk, Nolan said smoothly, about some very interesting transfers from the company's main accounts to a private one in the Cayman Islands. Transfers authorized by Ilara Winslow. What? I stood up so fast my chair toppled over. It's all here. Nolan held up my laptop. Every transaction, carefully hidden, along with some very interesting emails to offshore banks. Your daughter's been embezzling for months, Grant. My father's face went pale. That's impossible. Check for yourself. Nolan handed the laptop to Martinez. I discovered it last week. That's why I reached out to Robert, to protect the company from further damage. I stared at my husband, finally understanding. He hadn't just been stealing, he'd been setting me up as the fall guy all along. Nobody will believe this, I said, but my voice shook. They already do, Martinez said, showing us his phone. On the screen was a breaking news headline. Winslow Wellness Heir under investigation for financial misconduct. My mother gasped. Dad reached for me, but I stepped back, my mind racing. Then my phone buzzed again. Jackson, don't panic. I have backups of everything. And something else they don't know about. The board is waiting, Martinez said. They'll want answers. I looked at Nolan, at his perfect suit, his practiced concerned expression, the wedding ring he still wore like it meant something. Then I looked at my parents, seeing the doubt creeping into their eyes despite themselves. Okay, I said quietly. Let's go talk to the board. Nolan's smile flickered. He knew me well enough to be worried by my calm. As we walked to the boardroom, I sent one quick text to Jackson. Whatever you have, now's the time. Because Nolan had taught me something valuable. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about fighting back immediately. Sometimes it's about letting your enemies think they've won, right until the moment they realize they've lost everything. The boardroom doors loomed ahead. Inside, I could hear Lorraine's voice, probably already spinning her version of events. Beside me, Nolan reached for my hand, a perfect show of spousal support for our audience. I let him take it, feeling the weight of his wedding ring against my bare finger. And I smiled, thinking about how much could change in the next 5 minutes. Because Nolan wasn't the only one who knew how to play the long game. The boardroom felt like a courtroom, with 12 pairs of eyes watching my every move. Lorraine sat at one end, perfectly poised in her designer suit, while Tessa hovered near the window, pretending to check her phone. As you can see, Nolan continued his presentation. The transfers were carefully disguised. But once we traced them back to their source, he clicked to the next slide, showing my signature on various documents. My phone vibrated. Jackson. Ready when you are. Just say the word. Mrs. Winslow Mercer. Robert Martinez leaned forward. Do you have anything to say in your defense? I stood slowly, feeling Nolan's confident smirk without having to look at him. Actually, I do. But first, I'd like to ask my husband something. I turned to face Nolan. How's the weather in Zurich? His smile flickered. I don't understand. Because according to these, I pulled out my phone and projected Jackson's files onto the screen. You were there last week. With my sister-in-law. In the honeymoon suite of the Grand Hotel. Tessa dropped her phone. Lorraine's perfect posture crumbled. That's not. Nolan started, but I wasn't finished. And while you were there, you opened this account. Another screenshot appeared. Using a forged power of attorney with my signature. The same signature that appears on all these documents you're so concerned about. The boardroom erupted in whispers. My father stood up, his face thunderous. There's more, I said quietly. Jackson. The boardroom screen flickered, then filled with security footage. Nolan and Tessa in various hotel lobbies. Lorraine meeting with document forgers. Bank statements showing the real money trail, all leading back to the Mercers. You ungrateful little. Lorraine lunged forward, but security was already moving in.
How?
Nolan's voice cracked. How did you? Your nephew is quite talented with computers, I said. He's been recording your family meetings for months, including the one where you planned to frame me and take control of the company. Martinez was already on his phone, presumably calling his lawyers. The board members were huddled together, speaking in urgent whispers. Ilera, Nolan reached for me, his eyes desperate. Baby, please.
We can fix this.
Everything I did for us. No. I stepped back. You did it for yourself. And your mother. And your sister. The same sister you've been sleeping with for months. Tessa let out a choked sob. It wasn't like that. We were just. Save it for the prosecutors. My father cut in. Security was already escorting them toward the door. Wait, I called out. Everyone froze. I walked up to Nolan, close enough to smell his familiar cologne. You know what the worst part is? I actually loved you. Really loved you. And you couldn't even be bothered to come up with a better password than your sister's name and birth year. His face went white. Behind him, Lorraine started screaming about lawyers and revenge, while Tessa collapsed into dramatic sobs. As they were led away, my phone buzzed one last time. Jackson. There's a recording of them planning to run tonight. Sending to the police now. And, I'm sorry about everything. I texted back. Don't be. You did the right thing. The boardroom slowly emptied, leaving just me and my parents. Mom wrapped her arms around me while Dad made calls to our legal team. I can't believe they would, Mom started. I can, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. But that's not what matters now. What matters is fixing the damage they've done to the company. And to you. Mom touched my bare ring finger. I looked out the window, watching as security escorted the Mercers to waiting police cars. Nolan looked up, our eyes meeting through the glass. For a moment, I saw a flash of the man I thought I'd married, charming, ambitious, seemingly perfect. Then he was gone, and I felt something inside me finally break free. I'll be fine, I said, turning back to my parents. But first, we have work to do. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about getting better. 3 days after the boardroom showdown, I sat across from Nolan in an interrogation room at the Denver Police Department. His designer suit had been replaced by orange prison scrubs, but somehow he still looked like he was the one in control. You really think this will fix anything? He asked, his voice soft. Destroying our family? Our family. I laughed, but it sounded hollow even to me. Was it our family when you were sleeping with your sister? Or when you and your mother planned to frame me for embezzlement? He leaned forward, chains rattling. Everything I did because I loved you too much. You were always so perfect, so untouchable. The golden Winslow heir. Don't. But you're not perfect anymore, are you? His smile was gentle, almost sad. Check your phone. As if on cue, it buzzed. A news alert. Winslow Wellness stock plummets amid family scandal. CEO Grant Winslow steps down. My hands started shaking. What did you do? Me? Nothing. But Lorraine has friends in interesting places. And Tessa, well, she always knew how to work the press. Another buzz. This time from Jackson. They're releasing everything. All of it. Even the stuff about you and Dad's gambling problem cover-up last year. The room spun. That was supposed to be buried. The time I'd used company funds to cover my father's secret gambling debts. Only 3 people knew about that. Me, Dad, and how long have you been planning this? I whispered. Since the day we met. Nolan's eyes softened. You were so busy protecting your family's legacy, you never noticed I was building a case against you. Everything backed up, documented, ready to go if you ever turned on us. My phone kept buzzing. Messages from the board, from reporters, from Dad's lawyer. Each one worse than the last. "You could still fix this," Nolan said quietly. "Drop the charges.
Come home.
We'll weather this storm together, like we always have." For a moment, one terrible, weak moment, I considered it. Then I remembered Jackson's recordings, the look in Tessa's eyes when she talked about Nolan, the way Lorraine had planned my downfall over Sunday dinners. "No." I stood up. "You don't get to win this time." "I already have." He sat back, chains clinking. "Your father's finished. The company's tanking. And now everyone knows the perfect Alara Winslow is just as corrupt as the rest of us." I reached for the door, but his next words stopped me cold. "By the way, you never asked who sent that first anonymous letter. The one that started all this." I turned slowly. "Jackson said." Jackson did what he was told. By his grandmother. Nolan's smile widened. "Mom knew you'd investigate. Knew you'd find exactly what we wanted you to find. And knew you'd be so focused on exposing us, you'd never notice we were really exposing you." The truth hit me like a physical blow. We'd all been played, me, Jackson, even Tessa. This had been Lorraine's plan all along. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from my mother. "Come home now. Your father's had a heart attack." I left without looking back at Nolan, but I could feel his eyes on me. In the parking lot, reporters were already gathering, shouting questions about family betrayal and financial fraud. I got in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Everything I'd done to protect my family had somehow destroyed them instead. The company was failing, Dad was in the hospital, and now everyone would know about the gambling cover-up. Lorraine had won. She'd turned my revenge into my own undoing. But as I pulled out of the parking lot, dodging reporters and camera flashes, I remembered something my father once told me. Rock bottom is just the foundation you build on. I grabbed my phone and dialed Jackson's number. Because if the Mercers had taught me anything, it was that family secrets work both ways. And I was done playing defense. I found Lorraine in her country club's private dining room, calmly sipping champagne like she hadn't just orchestrated my family's destruction. The room was empty except for us, fitting for what I was about to do. "I wondered when you'd figure it out," she said, not looking up from her glass. "Nolan always said you were clever. Just not clever enough." I placed my phone on the table between us, screen up. "Clever enough to record everything you just said to the SEC investigator in the parking lot." Her hand trembled slightly, champagne sloshing. "What are you talking about?" "The one you paid to bury evidence about your involvement in the Martinez deal. The same evidence Jackson's been collecting for months, ever since you first started planning this takedown." Jackson. For the first time, uncertainty crossed her face. "He wouldn't. Your grandson's been working with the FBI's cybercrime division for 6 months," I said, watching her perfect composure crack. "Turns out he's quite the prodigy. And very interested in corporate fraud cases." The dining room door opened. Tessa burst in, mascara streaked down her face. "Mom, they're arresting Nolan again. Something about offshore accounts in both our names." "Sit down, Tessa," I said quietly. "Your mother needs to hear this too." Tessa froze, looking between us. "What's going on?" "Show them." Jackson's voice came from behind her. He stepped into the room, laptop in hand. "Show them everything." Lorraine stood up so fast her chair toppled. "Jackson, whatever you think you're doing." "I'm doing what you taught me," he said, setting up his laptop. "Family first, right? Except I finally figured out which family deserves loyalty." The screen filled with documents, recordings, bank statements, 3 years of meticulously gathered evidence. Lorraine's master plan to use me to take control of Winslow Wellness. Tessa and Nolan's affair, carefully orchestrated to ensure maximum damage when revealed. Every manipulation, every lie, every calculated move. "You were never the target," I told Tessa, whose face had gone ash-white. "You were just another pawn in your mother's game. Like Nolan. Like all of us." "That's not," Lorraine started, but Jackson cut her off. "I have the recordings from your study, Grandma. The ones where you told Mom that Nolan was just doing his part, that sleeping with her would make the scandal more devastating. Tessa made a sound like she'd been struck. Mom, everything I did was for this family. Lorraine's voice shook. To give us what we deserve. Save it, I interrupted. The FBI has everything. So does the SEC. And in about 30 seconds, so will every major news outlet in the country. As if on cue, phones started buzzing throughout the room. Breaking news alerts lit up screens. Mercer family fraud scheme exposed. Winslow Wellness Air cleared of all charges. You can't, Lorraine whispered. I already did. I stood up. The company stock is already recovering. Dad's doctors say the stress of your little scheme probably saved his life. They caught a blocked artery during his cardiac exam. And Nolan? Well, he's agreed to testify against both of you in exchange for a reduced sentence. Tessa collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Lorraine remained standing, her perfect posture finally broken. You really think you've won? She asked. No, I said, gathering my things. I think we all lost something here. The difference is I'm done playing games. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Lorraine? The country club board voted this morning. Your membership's been revoked. As I walked out, Jackson fell into step beside me. That was pretty badass, he said. You're the badass. I bumped his shoulder. FBI Cybercrime Division? Really? He grinned. Turns out there are better ways to handle family drama than embezzlement and affair. Behind us, we could hear Lorraine's carefully constructed world crumbling. But ahead of us was something better than revenge, a chance to build something new from the ashes of what we'd lost. And this time, we'd build it on truth. 1 year later, I stood in front of the mirror in my office at Winslow Wellness, adjusting my blazer before the press conference. The company had not just recovered, we'd grown stronger, more transparent, more ethical. Sometimes the worst storms clear the air. A knock at the door. They're ready for you, Jackson said, looking professional in his summer intern badge. He'd traded his hoodies for button-downs, at least during office hours. How's your mom? I asked, gathering my notes. Better. The therapy's helping. She's talking about maybe opening her own business, something small. He paused. She asked about you, actually. I nodded, remembering the last time I'd seen Tessa, at Nolan's sentencing. She looked lost, broken, but somehow more real than she ever had at Lorraine's perfectly staged family dinners. And your grandmother? Still not speaking to me. He shrugged, but I caught the hurt in his eyes. The prison psychiatrist says she's not ready to accept responsibility. The boardroom was packed when we entered. Dad sat at the head of the table, looking healthier than he had in years. Mom squeezed my hand as I passed, her smile proud and a little sad. Before we begin, I addressed the room. I want to acknowledge something. A year ago, this company almost fell apart because we forgot what matters most. Not profit margins or stock prices, but integrity.
Trust.
Real family values, not just the ones we put in our mission statement. Cameras flashed as I continued. Today, we're announcing a new initiative. The Winslow Foundation for Corporate Ethics, with a focus on preventing financial fraud and supporting whistleblowers. And I'm proud to announce our first scholarship recipient, Jackson Mercer, who'll be attending MIT's cybersecurity program this fall. The applause was genuine. Jackson ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. After the press conference, I found a familiar envelope on my desk. Inside was a letter from Nolan, postmarked from prison. I heard about the foundation, he'd written. You always were better at building things than destroying them. I'm sorry I made you choose between the two. I slipped the letter into my drawer without responding. Some bridges stay burned, and that's okay. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number.
Proud of you, sis.
T. I smiled, remembering something Dad had told me during his recovery. The hardest part of betrayal isn't the pain. It's deciding what to do with the pieces afterward. The elevator dinged, and Robert Martinez stepped out. Miss Winslow?
Got a minute?
There's something you should know about some of Lorraine's old contacts. Actually, I cut him off. I have a meeting. But our compliance team would love to hear what you know. I nodded to Jackson, who was already pulling up a recording app on his tablet. Martinez paled slightly, but followed Jackson to the conference room. Later that evening, I stood in my new apartment, watching the sunset paint Denver's skyline. The wall where Nolan's family photos once hung now displayed my degrees, awards, and a framed letter from the FBI thanking me for my cooperation in the Mercer case.
My doorbell rang.
Mom stood there with takeout and a bottle of wine. Thought you might want company tonight. How did you know? She smiled. Because it's your wedding anniversary. And because I'm your mother. We ate on my balcony, talking about everything and nothing. About Dad's golf game improving, about Jackson's college plans, about the company's future. You know, Mom said finally, revenge and redemption often look the same at first. The difference is in what you build afterward. I thought about Nolan's letter, about Tessa's text, about Lorraine's silence, about all the ways family can break and heal and transform. I'm not interested in revenge anymore, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. I'm interested in truth, in growth, in real legacy. Mom raised her glass. To new foundations. To new foundations, I echoed, watching the last light fade from the sky. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even or moving on. Sometimes it's about growing beyond the person you were when you were hurt and helping others do the same.